The transport shuttle rattled through atmospheric entry, and combat medic Elena Voss gripped the harness straps until her knuckles went white. 48 hours ago, she had been treating colonists on Kepler Station for routine ailments. Now she was being deployed to the 9th Talon Battalion, an elite Kael'thar unit operating in the contested territories of Arcturus Prime. The reassignment had come without warning, without explanation, and without regard for the fact that the Kael'thar notoriously detested working alongside humans. Through the viewport, she could see the dark purple landscape of Arcturus Prime stretching endlessly below, interrupted by jagged mountain ranges and the occasional glimmer of bioluminescent forests. The planet had been a Kael'thar colony world before the Dominion War, before humans had arrived in this sector with their treaties and their alliances and their insistence on integration. The Kael'thar had never forgiven humanity for what they saw as an invasion of their ancestral territories. The shuttle touched down with a metallic groan at forward operating base nightfall. Elena gathered her medical kit and stepped out onto the landing platform. The gravity here was slightly heavier than Earth standard, and the air carried a sharp, mineral scent that made her nose wrinkle. A group of Kael'thar soldiers stood in formation near the command center, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming dark blue in the dim light of Arcturus Prime's distant sun. They were tall, nearly 7 feet on average, with 4 arms that ended in 3-fingered hands capable of both delicate precision and crushing strength. Their heads were angular, with compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could barely imagine and mandibles that clicked in their complex language. A human officer approached her, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Integrated Forces Command. Captain Marcus Webb looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting bureaucratic battles rather than military ones. He offered Elena a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Welcome to Nightfall, Medic Voss. I wish I could say I was glad to see you, but honestly, I tried to block this assignment. The 9th Talon made it very clear they did not want a human medic." Elena shifted her pack on her shoulders. "Then why am I here, sir?" "Because their last medic was killed in action 3 weeks ago, and the Kael'thar Medical Command refused to send a replacement until they complete their internal investigation into how a supposedly impenetrable position got overrun. Coalition Command decided we could not leave an elite unit without medical support, regardless of their preferences." Webb started walking toward the command center, and Elena fell into step beside him. His voice dropped lower. "I will be blunt with you. The 9th Talon has a reputation. They are brilliant tacticians, fearless in combat, and they have never lost an objective they were assigned to take. They are also rigid in their adherence to Kael'thar military doctrine and openly hostile to what they call human adaptational chaos." Elena had heard the phrase before. It was how the Kael'thar described human tactical improvisation, the tendency of human soldiers to deviate from established protocols when circumstances demanded flexibility. To the Kael'thar, whose entire military philosophy was built on intricate planning and precise execution, human unpredictability was not an asset but a fatal flaw. The command center was carved into the side of a basalt cliff, its entrance flanked by automated defense turrets. Inside, holographic displays showed tactical overlays of the surrounding territory. Red markers indicated Dominion positions, blue showed coalition forces, and the contested zones in between were a chaotic mix of purple and orange. A group of Kael'thar officers stood around the central display, their mandibles clicking rapidly in their native language. One of them turned as Elena and Webb entered. He was larger than the others, his exoskeleton marked with scars that told of countless battles. His rank insignia identified him as Battle Commander Vector, leader of the 9th Talon. His compound eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under examination. "This is the human medic." Vector's words were formed in perfect coalition standard, but his tone made it clear that speaking the human language was a distasteful necessity. "Captain Webb, we made our position abundantly clear to Coalition Command." Webb stiffened but kept his voice diplomatic. "Battle Commander, Medic Voss is a certified combat medic with 3 years of field experience. Her records show exceptional performance under fire. She is here to ensure your unit has the medical support it needs." "We had medical support." Vektar's mandibles clicked sharply. Medic Sharek died because she followed her training precisely as doctrine required. The situation that killed her was beyond the scope of predictable medical scenarios. And now you send us a human who will undoubtedly improvise and deviate from proven protocols, potentially causing more casualties than she prevents. Elena felt her jaw tighten but forced herself to remain silent. Webb had warned her that arguing would only make things worse. The captain gestured toward her. "Medic Voss will be assigned to your unit effective immediately. I expect you to integrate her into your medical response protocols." Webb nodded to Elena. "Good luck, medic." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the Kaeldar officers. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then Vektar gestured to one of his subordinates, a younger Kaeldar whose exoskeleton bore fewer scars. "This is 3rd Talon Reksha. He will show you to the medical bay and provide you with our operational procedures. You will study them thoroughly and adhere to them without deviation. Is that understood?" "Understood, Battle Commander." Elena kept her voice steady and professional. Vektar turned back to the tactical display without another word, dismissing her as if she had already ceased to exist. Reksha motioned for her to follow, leading her through a series of corridors carved from the native rock. The base was a labyrinth of intersecting tunnels, each marked with Kaeldar glyphs that Elena could not read. The medical bay was smaller than she expected, a single room equipped with Kaeldar medical technology that looked both sophisticated and completely alien. The instruments were designed for four-armed users, and the anatomical displays showed Kaeldar physiology in precise detail. There was a smaller section in one corner with human-compatible equipment, clearly added as an afterthought. Reksha activated a holographic display, and walls of text appeared in Coalition Standard. "These are our medical protocols. You will memorize them. The 9th Talon operates on precision and predictability. Every member of this unit must know exactly what to expect in any situation. Improvisation introduces chaos, and chaos kills soldiers." Elena scanned the protocols. They were comprehensive and meticulously detailed, covering every conceivable injury and medical emergency with step-by-step procedures. But they were also rigid, offering no flexibility for situations that fell outside their defined parameters. "I will study these 3rd Talon. See that you do." Reksha's mandibles clicked in what might have been disapproval. "We deploy at dawn. There is a Dominion supply depot in the Kareth Valley that must be eliminated. It will be a straightforward operation if everyone follows their assigned roles." He paused at the door. "For what it is worth, human, I do not share the battle commander's complete disdain for your species, but I have seen what happens when doctrine is abandoned. Medic Sharek died because the situation exceeded protocol, yes, but she died with honor, knowing she had done everything correctly. There is comfort in that for her kin. I wonder if humans understand such comfort." He left before Elena could respond. She spent the next several hours studying the Kaeldar medical protocols, committing them to memory even as part of her mind rebelled against their inflexibility. She had been trained to adapt, to think on her feet, to find solutions when the textbook answers did not apply. That was how human medics survived in combat zones. But here, with the 9th Talon, adaptation was viewed as a dangerous liability. Sleep came fitfully in the small quarters she had been assigned. The walls hummed with the base's life support systems, and through the rock, She could hear the distant clicks and trills of Kael'thar communication. She dreamed of emergency rooms back on Earth, of trauma bays where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death, where improvisation was not just accepted but celebrated. Dawn on Arcturus Prime was a subtle thing, the distant sun barely brightening the purple sky. Elena reported to the staging area where the 9th Talon was assembling. There were 20 Kael'thar soldiers in full combat armor, their weapons gleaming with the distinctive crystalline technology of their people. They moved with practiced precision, each taking their assigned position without need for verbal commands. Elena recognized the pattern from her studies. The Kael'thar used a complex system of subtle body language and pheromone signals to coordinate in combat, a language humans could neither speak nor fully understand. Vectar stood at the front of the formation, his armor more elaborate than the others, marked with symbols that indicated his rank and battle honors. He turned his compound eyes toward Elena. "You will remain in the center of the formation at all times. When we engage the enemy, you will take cover and await casualties. You will not move from your assigned position unless specifically ordered. You will not attempt to reach wounded soldiers until the tactical situation allows for medical extraction. Is this clear?" "Crystal clear, Battle Commander." The march to Kareth Valley took 4 hours through terrain that shifted between rocky outcrops and dense patches of the bioluminescent vegetation that covered much of Arcturus Prime. The plants glowed with a soft blue light, their leaves rustling with a sound almost like whispering. The 9th Talon moved in perfect formation, their footfalls synchronized, their weapons sweeping their assigned sectors with mechanical precision. Elena found herself studying them as they moved. She had worked alongside Kael'thar before, but never in such an intimate setting. She began to notice the small variations in their movements, the way Reksha favored his left side slightly, suggesting an old injury. The way another soldier, whose designation was marked as 5th Talon Kethare, had a subtle tremor in her lower right arm. These were the kinds of details human medics were trained to observe, the small signs that might indicate larger problems. The Dominion supply depot came into view as they crested a ridge. It was a prefabricated structure surrounded by defensive barriers and automated turrets. Thermal scans showed approximately 30 Dominion soldiers inside, a mix of species from across their conquered territories. The depot's location made a frontal assault nearly impossible, but the 9th Talon's plan did not call for a frontal assault. Vectar signaled, and the unit split into 3 groups with fluid precision. They had clearly run this exact scenario countless times in training. Elena found herself positioned behind a cluster of rocks with Reksha and 2 other soldiers. From here, she had a clear view of the depot and the attack lanes the 9th Talon would use. The assault began with perfect synchronization. One group disabled the automated defenses with electromagnetic pulses, while another breached the eastern wall with shaped charges. The third group, led by Vectar himself, swept through the breach with devastating efficiency. The Dominion soldiers never had time to mount an effective defense. Within 10 minutes, the depot was secure and demolition charges were being set. Elena watched it all unfold exactly as the tactical briefing had outlined. Not a single member of the 9th Talon had been injured. It was impressive, she had to admit. The Kael'thar way of war might lack the flexibility she was used to, but its precision was undeniable. Then everything went wrong. The demolition charges detonated early. Elena never learned if it was a malfunction or if the Dominion had somehow rigged their own facility with dead man switches. The explosion tore through the depot with far more force than intended, and the shockwave knocked half the 9th Talon off their feet. Worse, the blast destabilized the entire ridge. The ground began to collapse, turning solid rock into a tumbling avalanche of stone and dust. Elena hit the ground as boulders crashed around her. She covered her head with her arms, feeling smaller rocks pelt her body armor. When the rumbling finally stopped, she looked up through the settling dust to see chaos. The ninth talon's perfect formation had been shattered. Soldiers were scattered across the slope, some trapped under debris, others struggling to their feet with obvious injuries. She was already moving before conscious thought caught up with her training. Her medical kit was in her hands, and she was scrambling over the rocks toward the nearest casualty. It was Kethare, the soldier whose tremor she had noticed earlier. A boulder had crushed her lower left leg, the exoskeleton cracked and leaking the blue-green hemolymph that served as Kael'thar blood. Elena dropped beside her, assessing the injury with rapid precision. The leg was destroyed beyond repair. She would need to amputate to prevent hemolymph loss from killing the soldier. She reached for her surgical tools and then froze. According to Kael'thar medical protocol, amputation required specific authorization from a senior medical officer. It was a major procedure that demanded careful consideration of long-term rehabilitation options and psychological impact. The protocol called for stabilization, pain management, and evacuation to a proper medical facility. But there was no time for that. The avalanche had likely attracted every Dominion patrol within 10 kilometers. They needed to move, and they needed to move now. Kethare would bleed out before they could reach the base if Elena followed protocol. She made her decision in the space of a heartbeat. Working with swift confidence, she injected localized anesthetic into Kethare's neural clusters, then used her laser scalpel to sever the ruined leg just below the knee joint. Kael'thar anatomy was different from human, but trauma was trauma in any species. She sealed the major hemolymph vessels with surgical adhesive, applied synthetic chitin patches over the wound, and wrapped it in compression bandages. The entire procedure took less than 3 minutes. Kethare's compound eyes focused on her with what might have been shock or gratitude or simply pain. Elena could not read Kael'thar expressions well enough to tell. "You will live, fifth Talon. We need to move. Can you walk?" Kethare tested her remaining legs, then nodded. "I can manage." Elena was already moving to the next casualty. Reksha was conscious but trapped under a section of collapsed wall, his right side crushed. She could see fractures in his exoskeleton, cracks that leaked hemolymph in steady streams. This injury was beyond her immediate ability to treat. According to protocol, Reksha needed specialized orthopedic intervention that could only be provided at a fully equipped medical facility. But protocol also said not to move patients with spinal injuries, and Elena could see that waiting here meant death for everyone. She made another split-second decision, one that would haunt her later but felt absolutely right in the moment. She used her emergency jack to lift the wall section just enough to pull Reksha free, knowing she might be causing more damage but also knowing that leaving him here was not an option. She stabilized his fractures with quick-setting polymer splints, a human invention that the Kael'thar medical protocols did not even acknowledge existed. Then she moved to the next casualty, and the next, working with a speed and efficiency that came from years of emergency medicine in chaotic conditions. She triaged rapidly, making hard choices about who needed immediate intervention and who could wait. She improvised constantly, using human medical techniques that were not in any Kael'thar manual. Somewhere in the chaos, she became aware of Vektar watching her. The battle commander had sustained injuries of his own, his armor scorched and dented, but he was mobile and coordinating the unit's withdrawal. His compound eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that she could feel even without looking directly at him. The Dominion patrols arrived faster than expected, drawn by the explosion and the dust cloud. The ninth Talon was in no condition to fight, not scattered and injured as they were. Vektar made the call to retreat, and the unit began falling back toward a secondary rally point 3 kilometers to the north. Elena found herself supporting Reksha, helping him move despite his injuries. Another soldier, whose designation she did not know, was carrying Kethare. They moved as quickly as the injured could manage, but it was nowhere near fast enough. The Dominion forces were closing in, their weapons' fire getting closer with each minute. They reached a narrow canyon, and Vektar made another decision. He positioned the mobile soldiers at the canyon mouth to hold off the pursuers while Elena and the other medic, a Kaeldar named Vorin who had been with the demolition team and escaped major injury, worked to stabilize the casualties enough for a longer march. Elena worked frantically, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She had abandoned any pretense of following Kaeldar protocol. She was using every trick she knew, every technique she had learned in emergency rooms and field hospitals. She used human-designed hemostatic agents to stop bleeding, human surgical techniques to repair damaged exoskeletons, human pain management drugs that were not approved for Kaeldar use, but which she knew from her xenobiology training would work. Vorin watched her with obvious confusion and perhaps a hint of horror. "You are not following protocol." His words were barely audible over the sound of weapons fire echoing through the canyon. "Protocol will get them killed." Elena did not look up from her work. "Right now, they need to survive the next hour. We will worry about the rest later." The firefight at the canyon mouth was fierce but brief. The 9th Talon's position was too well defended, and the Dominion forces eventually pulled back to regroup. It gave the unit just enough time to complete their retreat. They reached the secondary rally point as Arcturus Prime's sun was setting, casting the landscape in deeper shades of purple and shadow. A transport shuttle was waiting, and Elena helped load the casualties aboard. The flight back to base was tense and silent. The Kaeldar soldiers who were still conscious avoided looking at her, their body language suggesting confusion and unease. Only Vektar met her eyes, and his expression was unreadable. Back at Forward Operating Base Nightfall, Elena spent the next 6 hours in the medical bay ensuring her patients were stable. Kethare was already adapting to her amputation with the resilience typical of Kaeldar physiology. Reksha's fractures were serious but would heal with proper care. The others were in various stages of recovery, none of them facing permanent disability thanks to the interventions Elena had made in the field. She had just finished her final checks when Vektar entered the medical bay. He stood for a long moment, his forearms held in a posture she could not interpret. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "You violated protocol repeatedly today, Medic Voss. By Kaeldar military law, your actions could be considered medical malpractice. Several of my soldiers should have died in the field rather than undergo unauthorized procedures without proper consultation and planning." Elena straightened, meeting his compound eyes without flinching. "With respect, Battle Commander, several of your soldiers would have died in the field if I had followed protocol. The situation demanded immediate action. That is precisely the problem." Vektar's mandibles clicked softly. "You made decisions that should have required consultation with senior medical staff. You used techniques and medications that are not approved for Kaeldar treatment. You performed amputations and spinal manipulations that could have caused permanent damage. But they did not." Elena kept her voice level. "Every soldier I treated today will make a full recovery. Kethare is already walking. Reksha will regain full mobility in his right side within weeks. I saved their lives. You improvised." The way Vektar said it made it sound like an accusation of the worst crime imaginable. "You abandoned established medical doctrine in favor of untested human methods. You introduced chaos into a situation that demanded precision. I introduced adaptation." Elena felt her frustration rising but fought to keep it under control. "Battle Commander, I understand that your people value precision and planning. I respect that, But combat is inherently chaotic. No plan survives contact with the enemy intact. The ability to adapt, to improvise, to find solutions to problems that were not in the manual, that is not a weakness. It is what keeps soldiers alive when everything goes wrong. Vektar was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He gestured toward a seating alcove at the side of the medical bay. "Sit with me, Medic Voss. I wish to understand something." Elena sat cautiously, unsure where this conversation was going. Vektar settled onto the Kaildar equivalent of a chair, his posture shifting into something that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "We lost Medic Sharek 3 weeks ago. She was—" Vektar paused, and for the first time, Elena heard something like emotion in his voice. "She was one of the finest medical officers I have served with. Brilliant, dedicated, precise in all things. The operation should have been simple. We were extracting intelligence from a Dominion communications post. The building was supposed to be empty except for automated systems. But there were soldiers inside. They had rigged the structure with traps, with weapons designed to kill in ways we had not anticipated." Elena listened without interrupting. She had read the official report, but hearing it from Vektar gave it a different context. Sharek did everything correctly. When soldiers fell to the traps, she followed protocol exactly. She waited for tactical clearance before entering danger zones. She prioritized injuries according to established triage procedures. She used only approved medical techniques. Vektar's mandibles clicked in a pattern that sounded almost like grief. And because she did everything correctly, 3 soldiers died while she waited for authorization to move. 4 more died because the protocols for treating their specific injuries required equipment we did not have in the field. Sharek herself died when a secondary trap was triggered, because protocol said she should be in exactly the position where she was standing. Elena felt a chill run through her. The pieces began to fall into place in her mind. Your people blamed the protocol, not Sharek. No. Vektar's voice was firm. We blamed the situation. Protocol exists to minimize risk and ensure predictable outcomes. When protocol fails, it means the situation exceeded acceptable parameters. Sharek followed her training perfectly. She did everything right. She died with honor. But you do not believe that. Elena said it gently, and she saw Vektar stiffen slightly at the observation. You think she could have saved them. You think she could have saved herself. What I believe is irrelevant. Vektar's tone was hard again. I am a battle commander. I enforce doctrine. I ensure my soldiers operate with precision. To question protocol is to introduce uncertainty, and uncertainty kills. Yet here I am, alive and standing in your medical bay after saving multiple members of your unit using methods that violated every protocol you hold sacred. Elena leaned forward slightly. Battle commander, I do not claim human methods are superior to Kaildar methods. But I think maybe there is room for both. Precision and flexibility. Planning and adaptation. What if the answer is not choosing one or the other, but learning when each is appropriate?
Vektar stod abruptly.
That is a very human perspective, Medic Voss. He moved toward the door, then paused. My soldiers are alive because of your actions today. I cannot ignore that fact, even if I find your methods troubling. We will continue operations, and you will continue to serve as our medic. But understand this, I will be watching closely. If your improvisation ever causes harm to my soldiers, I will hold you personally responsible. He left before she could respond. Elena sat alone in the medical bay, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling over her. She had won a battle today, kept soldiers alive against impossible odds. But she had the feeling that the real fight was just beginning. The next few weeks established an uneasy routine. The 9th Talon continued their operations against Dominion positions, and Elena accompanied them on every mission. She studied the Kaeldar protocols diligently, learning to recognize situations where they could be applied effectively. But when circumstances demanded deviation, she did not hesitate to improvise. Each time she did, she could feel the tension from the Kaeldar soldiers, their unease with her unpredictability. But they also could not argue with her results. Under her care, the 9th Talon's casualty rate dropped significantly. Injuries that might have proven fatal in the field were stabilized with quick thinking and adapted techniques. Soldiers who should have required evacuation were kept combat-ready with improvised treatments. The unit's operational effectiveness increased, even as the Kaeldar struggled to reconcile this success with their discomfort over how it was achieved. Elena began to notice changes in how individual soldiers interacted with her. Kethare, now moving confidently on her prosthetic limb, started asking questions about human medical training. Reksha, fully recovered from his spinal injuries, began requesting that Elena review his own medical readiness before missions. Even Vorin, the other medic who had been so shocked by her protocol violations, started quietly asking her advice on difficult cases. Vektar remained distant but observant. Elena would catch him watching her during mission briefings, his compound eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every decision she made. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. A useful asset? A dangerous variable? Something else entirely? The turning point came during an operation in the Korath Mountains. The 9th Talon was tasked with destroying a Dominion weapons facility built into the side of a cliff face. The approach was treacherous, requiring the unit to traverse narrow ledges while under potential fire from above. The mission plan was typical Kaeldar precision. Every movement choreographed, every contingency accounted for, every soldier knowing exactly where they should be at every moment. The facility itself was more heavily defended than intelligence had suggested. The 9th Talon adapted their assault plan on the fly, something Elena had learned they could do when absolutely necessary, though it clearly caused them discomfort. The battle was fierce and close quarters, the kind of fighting where planning gave way to instinct and training. Elena was positioned in a protected alcove with sight lines to the main assault corridors. She watched the 9th Talon move through the facility with their characteristic precision, even under fire. They were magnificent warriors, she had to admit. The way they coordinated without verbal communication, the way they anticipated each other's movements, it was like watching a deadly dance. Then she saw Vektar go down. The battle commander had been leading the assault on the facility's command center when an explosion tore through the corridor. He was thrown backward, his armor shredded, his exoskeleton cracked in multiple places. Elena saw the distinctive blue-green spray of hemolymph and knew immediately that his injuries were critical. She was moving before anyone else could react, abandoning her protected position and sprinting toward Vektar's location. She could hear Reksha shouting at her in Kaeldar, probably ordering her to stay back, to wait for tactical clearance, to follow protocol. She ignored him. Vektar was bleeding out, and every second counted. She reached the battle commander and dropped to her knees beside him. His armor was ruined, exposing the damaged exoskeleton beneath. She could see fractures in his thorax, damage to his primary cardiac cluster, and what looked like internal bleeding. By any reasonable assessment, these were mortal wounds. Kaeldar medical protocol would call for comfort care and dignified last moments, not aggressive intervention. Elena tore open her medical kit and began working with furious intensity. She cut away the damaged sections of his exoskeleton to access the injuries beneath. She used emergency hemostatic agents to control the bleeding, working against Kaeldar physiology that was not designed for the clotting factors she was introducing. She performed emergency surgery right there in the corridor, under fire, using instruments designed for human anatomy on alien organs she had only studied in textbooks. At one point, Voron appeared beside her. His mandibles were clicking rapidly in what she had learned was a sign of extreme agitation. You cannot save him. The injuries are too severe. Protocol says we should make him comfortable. Protocol is going to let him die. Elena did not look up from her work. I am not going to let that happen. She kept working, her hands steady even as weapons fire echoed through the corridor around her. Other members of the 9th Talon had formed a defensive perimeter, protecting her and Vector while she operated. She could feel their doubt, their fear that she was prolonging their commander's suffering rather than saving him. But she also felt their desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, the crazy human medic could pull off another miracle. Vector's cardiac cluster had been damaged, 2 of his 3 hearts barely functioning. Elena used a combination of human cardiac medications and Kaldar circulatory stimulants, creating a cocktail that should not have worked but somehow did. She repaired a ruptured hemolymph vessel using a technique she had invented on the spot, adapting a human vascular surgery procedure to alien physiology. She stabilized his fractured exoskeleton with polymer supports and synthetic chitin patches. When she finally sat back, her hands covered in blue-green hemolymph, Vector's vital signs were weak but stable. He was unconscious but alive. Against all odds, against every protocol, against every reasonable expectation, he was going to survive. The 9th Talon completed their mission, destroying the weapons facility and extracting safely. The journey back to base was tense, with Vector hovering between life and death for every kilometer. Elena stayed by his side, monitoring his condition constantly, adjusting treatments as his body fought to heal. She did not sleep, did not eat, barely moved except to check instruments and administer medications. 30 hours after the initial injury, Vector regained consciousness in the medical bay at Forward Operating Base Nightfall. His compound eyes focused slowly, and Elena watched as awareness returned to them. She was exhausted, swaying on her feet, but she managed a tired smile. "Welcome back, Battle Commander. You gave us quite a scare." Vector's mandibles moved slightly. His voice was weak but clear. "You saved my life. I remember. You violated every protocol in the Kaldar medical database." "Probably." Elena allowed herself a small laugh. "I may have invented a few new violations while I was at it." "Why?" The question seemed to cost Vector considerable effort. "Why did you risk so much? You could have let me die with honor following protocol. Instead, you gambled with experimental procedures that could have killed me in disgrace." Elena pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. She was too tired to stand anymore, too tired to carefully consider her words. "Because you are not a protocol battle commander. You are a person, a brilliant tactician, a dedicated leader, someone your soldiers would follow into hell if you asked. The universe has too few people like that. I was not going to let you die because some manual said your injuries were incompatible with life." Vector was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that Elena had not heard before. "Among my people there is a concept called reshtar. It roughly translates to life debt, but that does not capture the full meaning. When someone saves your life through actions that required great personal risk and sacrifice, you become connected to them, bound to them. Their honor becomes your honor. Their struggles become your struggles." Elena felt suddenly uncomfortable. "Battle Commander, I was just doing my job. You do not owe me anything." "That is very human of you to say." Vector's mandibles clicked in a pattern she had learned indicated amusement. "But I am not human. By the traditions of my people, I am now reshtar to you. Connected." The words seemed to carry more meaning than the translation suggested. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the 9th Talon. The change was subtle at first, barely noticeable in the rigid formality of Kaeldar military culture. But Elena began to sense it. The soldiers no longer avoided her gaze. They started including her in their pre-mission rituals, the complex patterns of movement and pheromone exchange that reinforced unit cohesion. Reksha began teaching her basic Kaeldar combat signs, explaining that it would help her coordinate with them more effectively in the field. Most significantly, Vektar changed. He still enforced discipline and protocol, still demanded precision from his soldiers. But he also began asking Elena's opinion during tactical planning. He wanted to know how humans would approach certain problems, what improvisational solutions might exist for scenarios the protocols did not cover. He never abandoned Kaeldar doctrine, but he started to see it as a foundation to build on rather than an absolute limit. One evening, after a successful operation against a Dominion supply line, Vektar found Elena in the medical bay organizing her supplies. He watched her work for several moments before speaking. "I have been thinking about what you said, about precision and flexibility both having value." Elena looked up from her inventory. "Have you reached any conclusions?" "I have come to understand that my people and yours see the universe differently." Vektar moved to one of the viewing ports that looked out over the purple landscape of Arcturus Prime. "We Kaeldar seek to impose order on chaos. We believe that with enough planning and precision, any problem can be solved, any challenge can be met. It is how we built our civilization, how we survived in a hostile universe. There is nothing wrong with that philosophy. No, but it is incomplete." Vektar turned to face her. "I have watched you work, Medic Voss. I have seen you save lives that should have been lost. And I have come to realize that you are not simply abandoning order in favor of chaos. You are dancing with it. You see chaos not as something to be eliminated but as something to be navigated. You plan as much as circumstances allow, and then you adapt when those plans inevitably fail." Elena felt her breath catch slightly. That is exactly what human combat doctrine teaches. We cannot predict everything, so we train to be flexible. And we Kaeldar cannot adapt to everything, so we train to predict as much as possible. Vektar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps the answer is not that one approach is superior to the other. Perhaps the answer is that together, our strengths cover each other's weaknesses. It was such a simple observation, but hearing it from Vektar felt profound.
Elena smiled.
"That sounds like the foundation of a real alliance, battle commander. Not just political treaties, but actual understanding." The conversation was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the base. Both of them moved immediately, years of military training overriding everything else. They reached the command center to find it in controlled chaos. The tactical displays were lit up with hostile contacts. A major Dominion offensive was underway, aimed directly at forward operating base Nightfall. Captain Webb was coordinating the defense, his face grim. "They hit 3 of our positions simultaneously. This is not a raid. This is an all-out assault." He looked at Vektar. "The 9th Talon is our most effective unit. I need you to hold the northern approach. If they break through there, the entire base falls." Vektar studied the tactical display, his compound eyes tracking the enemy movements. "How long do we need to hold?" "Reinforcements are 6 hours out." Webb did not look happy about that timeline. "We will hold." Vektar's voice was absolutely certain. He turned to Elena. "Medic Voss, you will establish a field hospital in the northern sector. We will likely sustain heavy casualties." The next 6 hours were the longest of Elena's life. The Dominion threw everything they had at the northern approach, wave after wave of soldiers supported by artillery and airstrikes. The 9th Talon fought with their characteristic precision, but the sheer weight of numbers began to tell. Soldiers started falling back to Elena's field hospital with injuries ranging from minor to catastrophic. She worked in a state of heightened awareness, her hands moving faster than thought. She triaged rapidly, making impossible decisions about who could be saved and who was beyond help. She used every technique she knew, both Kaeldar and human, whatever would work for each specific injury. Around her, Vorin and 2 other Kaeldar medics worked with desperate intensity, and Elena realized they were following her lead rather than protocol. They were adapting, improvising, learning to dance with chaos the way she had tried to explain. For hours into the battle, the field hospital itself came under fire. A Dominion strike team had penetrated the defensive lines and was advancing on their position. Elena looked up from the soldier she was treating to see enemy combatants entering the hospital area, their weapons raised. What happened next felt almost dreamlike in its surreal clarity. The wounded Kaeldar soldiers, the ones who could still move, formed a defensive circle around the medical area. They were injured, some critically, but they positioned themselves between Elena and the enemy, protecting her. Protecting the medic who had saved their lives and violated every protocol to do it. Vectar appeared like an avenging angel, his armor scorched and his weapons blazing. He moved through the Dominion strike team with lethal efficiency, supported by Reksha and a squad of 9th Talon soldiers. The enemy was eliminated quickly, but not before several had gotten shots off. Elena felt something slam into her shoulder, spinning her around. She hit the ground hard, the world suddenly sharp and bright with pain. She heard Vectar shouting in Kaeldar, his voice carrying a note she had never heard before, something that sounded almost like fear. Then he was kneeling beside her, his 4 arms moving with frantic speed as he assessed her injury. One of his hands pressed against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding, while another reached for medical supplies. Elena found herself laughing, though it came out more like a cough. Ironic, is it not? The medic needing medical attention. Do not speak. Vectar's voice was strained. Vorin, I need hemostatic agents. Human compatible. She watched him work on her with the same desperate intensity she had shown when treating him. He was improvising, using techniques he must have learned from watching her, adapting Kaeldar medical procedures to human physiology. She wanted to tell him he was doing it wrong, that human anatomy was different, but the words would not come. The world was fading at the edges, darkness creeping in. Stay with me, Elena. Vectar's voice seemed to come from very far away. You do not have permission to die. That is an order. She wanted to laugh again at the absurdity of ordering someone not to die, but darkness was taking her. The last thing she remembered was the feeling of Vectar's hands working on her injury with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a creature built for war. Elena woke in the medical bay, the familiar hum of equipment surrounding her. Her shoulder throbbed with deep, aching pain, but she was alive. She turned her head carefully and found Vectar sitting beside her bed. His armor was gone, revealing his natural exoskeleton with all its scars. He looked exhausted in a way she had never seen, his compound eyes dim. You stayed. Her voice was rough, her throat dry. You saved my life. Vectar's mandibles clicked softly. Did you think I would do less for you? Reshtar, remember. Connected. Elena managed a weak smile. How long was I unconscious? 18 hours. The battle ended 12 hours ago. Reinforcements arrived, and the Dominion offensive was repelled. She saw something shift in his posture, a subtle change that suggested discomfort. I violated numerous Kaeldar medical protocols while treating you. I improvised. I adapted. I used techniques I learned by watching you, techniques that are not in any official manual. And you are alive. Vectar leaned forward slightly. I understand now what you have been trying to show us. Protocol exists to save lives, but sometimes saving lives requires abandoning protocol. The wisdom is knowing which situations demand which approach. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, though she was not entirely sure why. You learned that from treating me? I learned it from serving with you. Vektar's voice carried a warmth she had never heard before. You came to us as an outsider, someone we did not want, someone we believed would bring chaos and failure. Instead, you showed us that there is strength in flexibility. That improvisation is not the enemy of discipline but its complement. The door to the medical bay opened, and the rest of the ninth talon filed in. All of them, even the ones who should have been resting from their own injuries. They stood in formation, and Vektar rose to join them. Elena watched with confusion as they began a complex ritual, their forearms moving in synchronized patterns, their mandibles clicking in rhythmic sequence.
Vor and stepped forward.
In the language of our people, what we are performing is called rekshantar. It is a ceremony of acceptance, of welcoming someone into the heart of a unit. It is rarely performed for outsiders. Reksha spoke next. You are no longer the human medic assigned to us. You are our medic. You are ninth talon. One by one, each soldier approached Elena's bed and touched her forehead gently with their primary right hand. It was clearly a gesture of deep significance in Kaeldar culture. When Vektar's turn came, he held his hand against her forehead for several long seconds. You taught us to adapt. His voice was soft, meant only for her. Now I must adapt to something I never expected to feel. What is that? Elena asked, though something in her chest already knew the answer. Humans have a word for it, I believe. Vektar's mandibles clicked in what she had learned was the Kaeldar equivalent of a smile. Affection. Respect. Something deeper than reshtar, more personal than the bond between commander and soldier. Elena felt her breath catch. Battle commander.
Vektar.
When we are alone, you may call me Vektar. The implications of what he was saying settled over her like a warm blanket. In Kaeldar culture, permission to use a personal name rather than rank was a sign of profound intimacy. She had studied enough of their customs to understand that. Vektar, I do not know if relationships between humans and Kaeldar are even possible. We are so different. We are. Vektar's compound eyes seemed to shine with an inner light. You are adaptable and chaotic. I am rigid and precise. You improvise. A plan. You see these as contradictions. I have come to see them as complementary. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a vulnerability she had never heard from him. In Kaeldar philosophy, the most stable structures are those that incorporate both rigid and flexible elements. The most beautiful patterns emerge from the interplay of order and chaos. Elena laughed softly, wincing as the motion pulled at her injured shoulder. Are you comparing our potential relationship to engineering principles? Is that not the most logical way to analyze the situation? But there was humor in Vektar's tone, a warmth that transcended the literal meaning of his words. The weeks of recovery gave Elena time to think. The ninth talon had been transformed by their experiences together. They still valued protocol and precision, but they had learned to recognize when adaptation was necessary. More importantly, they had learned to trust her judgment, to trust her methods, and to trust that sometimes the right course of action was not the one outlined in the manual. Vektar visited her daily, ostensibly to check on her recovery but increasingly just to talk. They discussed philosophy and tactics, compared human and Kaeldar perspectives on everything from military strategy to art. Elena learned that Kaeldar culture had a rich tradition of pattern weaving, creating intricate designs that were meant to represent the underlying order of the universe. Vektar showed her some of his own work, delicate patterns he had woven during quiet moments between battles. She found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Stories about why she had become a medic, about the patients she had lost and the ones she had saved, about her fears and hopes and dreams. Vektar listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, truly seen in a way she had not experienced before. Their relationship evolved slowly, carefully, both of them aware that they were navigating uncharted territory. There were practical considerations. Kaeldar and human biology were fundamentally different. Their emotional landscapes did not map onto each other perfectly. What one species considered an expression of affection might mean nothing to the other, or worse, might be interpreted as an insult. But they learned. Vektar learned that humans valued physical touch, gentle contact that conveyed warmth and connection. Elena learned that Kaeldar expressed affection through the sharing of pheromone signals, subtle chemical communications that she could not directly perceive, but could understand through his explanations. They found their own language, a hybrid communication style that drew from both their cultures. When Vektar wanted to show he cared, he would rest one of his hands on Elena's shoulder, a gesture that felt natural to her. When Elena wanted to express affection, she would sit close to him, allowing him to adjust his pheromone production in her presence, a Kaeldar intimacy ritual. Captain Webb noticed the change in the ninth Talon and, by extension, in Vektar and Elena. He called her to his office one afternoon, and his expression was unreadable. Medic Voss, I have received reports that are unusual. Webb leaned back in his chair. The ninth Talon's operational effectiveness has increased by 30% since you joined them. Their casualty rate has dropped by 45%. Most remarkably, they have begun sharing their adapted protocols with other Kaeldar units. Battle Commander Vektar has been giving lectures on the value of tactical flexibility. Elena was not sure if she was being praised or reprimanded. Is that a problem, sir? On the contrary, Webb smiled, and it transformed his tired face. It is exactly what the coalition has been hoping for. Real integration, not just political alliances. Humans and Kaeldar learning from each other, becoming stronger together than either species could be alone. He paused. There is also talk about you and Battle Commander Vektar. Personal talk. Elena felt her cheeks warm. Sir, I assure you that any personal relationship has not interfered with our professional duties. I am not accusing you of impropriety, medic. Webb's tone was gentle. I am simply observing that you two have become close. And I am wondering if you have considered what that means, not just for you personally, but for the broader integration effort. Elena had considered it. Late at night, when she could not sleep, she had thought about little else. A relationship between a human and a Kaeldar was unprecedented. It would face scrutiny from both species. There would be those who saw it as beautiful and those who saw it as unnatural. She and Vektar would be pioneers, blazing a trail that others might follow or might condemn them for attempting. I have considered it, sir. And I believe that if humans and Kaeldar can truly understand each other, truly connect despite our differences, then maybe there is hope for real peace in this sector. Not just the absence of war, but actual harmony. Webb nodded slowly. I hope you are right, medic. For all our sakes. The conversation with Webb stayed with Elena as she returned to her duties. She found Vektar in the observation deck, a small area at the top of the base that offered a panoramic view of Arcturus Prime's landscape. He was creating a new pattern, his four hands moving with practiced precision as he wove colored fibers into an intricate design. May I join you? Elena asked softly. Vektar gestured to the space beside him. Always. She sat down, watching his hands work for several minutes before speaking. Vektar, have you thought about what happens when the war ends? When we are not thrown together by necessity. Every day, Vector did not look up from his weaving. I think about whether what we have found together can survive in peacetime, whether our connection was born from crisis or whether it is something deeper. What do you believe? Vector finally looked at her, his compound eyes reflecting the purple light from outside. I believe that we are something new, neither purely human nor purely Kaeldar, but a synthesis of both. You have made me more flexible. I hope I have made you more deliberate. Together, we are balanced in a way that neither of us could be alone. He set down his weaving and reached out to touch her face with one of his hands, the gesture still careful after weeks of practice. Among my people, when we create a life bond with another, we weave a pattern together. Two individuals creating something that represents their unity. Would you weave with me, Elena? Elena understood the significance of what he was asking. In Kaeldar culture, pattern weaving together was the equivalent of a marriage proposal. It was a promise, a commitment, a declaration that two lives were now intertwined. I do not know how to weave Kaeldar patterns. Then we will create a new kind of pattern, one that incorporates both our traditions. Vector's voice was warm with emotion. We have been improvising since the day you arrived, adapting, finding new solutions to old problems. Why should this be any different? Elena laughed, feeling tears of joy prick at her eyes. She took the colored fibers he offered, their fingers touching as she accepted them. Show me how to begin. They worked together, Vector guiding her hands with patient instruction while she brought her own aesthetic sensibilities to the design. The pattern that emerged was unlike anything either species had created before. It combined the geometric precision of Kaeldar tradition with the organic flow that characterized human art. Where Kaeldar patterns typically used symmetry to represent order, and human patterns often embraced asymmetry to represent life's unpredictability, their shared creation incorporated both. It was a visual representation of everything they had learned together. As they worked, Elena felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what the coalition was supposed to be about. Not just military alliances and trade agreements, but genuine connection between species. The willingness to see past surface differences and find the common ground beneath. The pattern took shape over several hours, and when it was finally complete, Vector held it up to catch the light. The colors shifted and flowed, revealing new aspects depending on the angle. It is perfect. His mandibles clicked in a complex rhythm that Elena had learned signified deep emotional satisfaction. It represents us, structure and flexibility, precision and adaptation, order and chaos in balance. Elena reached out to touch the pattern, running her fingers along the woven threads. In human tradition, when two people commit to each other, they exchange symbols. Rings usually, objects that represent the unbroken circle of their bond. She smiled. I think this pattern serves the same purpose. Vector carefully folded the pattern and placed it in a protective case. In Kaeldar tradition, bonded pairs display their pattern in their shared living space. It serves as a daily reminder of their commitment. His compound eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Will you share living space with me, Elena? Will you be my bondmate in the tradition of my people and my partner in the tradition of yours? Yes. The word came easily, without hesitation. Yes to all of it. They sealed their commitment that evening in a ceremony that blended both their cultures. The ninth Talon attended, standing witness as Elena and Vector exchanged vows in both Coalition Standard and the Kaeldar language. Captain Webb officiated, his voice carrying genuine warmth as he spoke about the significance of their union. Two species, two individuals, choosing to build something together rather than remaining apart. Reksha approached them after the formal vows were complete. He carried a small box, which he presented to Elena with a gesture of respect. On behalf of the ninth Talon, we offer you this. It is a translator device calibrated specifically for Kael'thar pheromone communication. It will not let you produce the signals yourself, but it will allow you to understand them. Elena accepted the device with genuine gratitude, understanding the profound gift it represented. The Kael'thar rarely shared their pheromone communication technology with other species. She activated the device and suddenly the world expanded. She could sense the chemical signals emanating from the gathered Kael'thar. Joy,
Bride,
approval, affection. She turned to Vector and gasped softly. The pheromone signals coming from him were overwhelming. Love, devotion, hope, wonder, all of it directed at her. A chemical symphony of emotion that he had been expressing all along but which she had been unable to perceive. You feel this way? Her voice was barely a whisper. All this time, every moment since you saved my life in the mountains. Vector's spoken words were calm, but his pheromone signals were a storm of feeling. Every moment since you showed me that my rigid adherence to protocol was limiting rather than empowering. Every moment since you taught me that love itself is the ultimate improvisation. The ceremony concluded, and the ninth Talon dispersed to give them privacy. Elena and Vector returned to their shared quarters, a space that had been modified to accommodate both their needs. The woven pattern they had created together hung on the wall, illuminated by soft lighting that made the colors dance. They sat together in comfortable silence, Elena leaning against Vector's side while he held her with two of his arms. The other two were engaged in small movements, adjusting environmental controls and organizing nearby items. Elena had learned that Kael'thar were rarely completely still. Tell me about your family. Vector's request was gentle. You have shared many things with me, but rarely speak of those you left behind on Earth. Elena felt the familiar pang of homesickness. My parents died when I was young.
achete l'accident.
I was raised by my grandmother, a doctor who worked in emergency medicine. She was the one who inspired me to become a medic. She used to say that in the chaos of an emergency room, you learned who you really were. She sounds like a wise woman. Did she support your decision to join the military medical corps? She died before I enlisted. Elena felt Vector's arms tighten around her slightly, but I think she would have understood. She believed that healing was a calling, not just a profession. You honor her memory with your work. Vector's pheromone signals carried deep respect. Among my people, we believe that the dead live on through the actions of those they influenced. Your grandmother continues to save lives through your hands. What about your family? I have 3 siblings, all serving in various military units. My parents are pattern weavers by trade, artists who create the ceremonial patterns used in major life events. They were displeased when I chose the military over the family profession. Vector's mandibles clicked softly, but they understood I needed to find my own path. Have you told them about us? I sent them a message 3 days ago. Vector's pheromone signals carried pride and nervousness. I told them I had found my bondmate, and that she was human. I told them about your courage, your skill, your willingness to challenge my assumptions. What did they say? I have not yet received a response. Communication across interstellar distances takes time. But I know my parents. They will be curious, concerned, perhaps, about the practical difficulties. But ultimately, they will want to meet you.
Elena smiled.
I am curious to meet them as well. To see the pattern weavers who raised someone capable of such precise thought and such deep feeling. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams, planning for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. The war continued around them, but in their shared space, there was peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. The weeks that followed established new rhythms. Elena and Vektar learned to navigate the complexities of an interspecies relationship with the same adaptability they brought to military operations. Their sleep cycles did not align perfectly. Their dietary requirements were completely different. The environmental conditions comfortable for one were sometimes uncomfortable for the other. But they adapted, compromised, found solutions that worked for both. The Ninth Talon integrated their bond into the unit's culture with remarkable ease. Kaeldar military tradition had strong precedents for bonded pairs serving together. If anything, having their commander and medic bonded strengthened the unit's cohesion. It demonstrated trust at the highest level. Other units began to take notice. The Ninth Talon's success rate continued to climb, and military analysts attributed it to their unique blend of Kaeldar precision and human adaptability. Coalition Command started requesting that Vektar and Elena conduct training sessions for mixed-species units, teaching them how to leverage their different approaches. During one such training session, a young human soldier raised his hand. "Commander Vektar, how do you reconcile Kaeldar military doctrine with human tactical flexibility? They seem fundamentally opposed." Vektar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "They are opposed only if you view military operations as requiring a single unified approach. But consider this: a structure built entirely of rigid materials will shatter under stress. A structure built entirely of flexible materials will collapse under its own weight. The strongest structures incorporate both." He gestured to Elena, who stepped forward. "In practical terms, this means we plan as thoroughly as possible before any operation. We identify objectives, analyze terrain, predict enemy movements. That is the Kaeldar contribution. But we also acknowledge that no plan survives first contact intact. So we train our soldiers to recognize when the situation has changed enough to require adaptation. That is the human contribution." The training sessions were exhausting but rewarding. Elena and Vektar watched as mixed-species units began to operate with greater coordination, as human and Kaeldar soldiers learned to appreciate each other's strengths. It felt like they were building something larger than themselves. 6 months after their bonding ceremony, the Ninth Talon received orders for their most dangerous mission yet. Intelligence had located the Dominion's Central Command facility for the entire Arcturus sector. It was deep in enemy territory, heavily fortified, and protected by elite troops. But if it could be destroyed, it would cripple Dominion operations across dozens of star systems. Coalition Command was assembling a strike force of elite units from multiple species. The Ninth Talon would be part of the initial assault, tasked with breaching the facility's outer defenses. It was exactly the kind of mission the Kaeldar excelled at: complex, requiring perfect coordination, and absolutely critical to the war effort. The mission briefing took place in a secure conference room. Representatives from a dozen different units crowded around the holographic display. Vektar stood at the front with 2 other commanders: a human colonel named Sarah Martinez and a VRYNN war leader. Colonel Martinez outlined the strategy. The assault will occur in 3 phases. Phase 1, the Ninth Talon breaches the outer defenses and secures the entry point. Phase 2, the primary strike force moves in and eliminates internal resistance. Phase 3, demolition teams plant charges and we evacuate before the facility is destroyed. What is the expected casualty rate? The VRYNN war leader's question was blunt. Martinez hesitated. Projections suggest we will lose between 30 and 40% of the assault force. The facility is designed to be nearly impregnable, but the strategic value justifies the risk. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She caught Vektar's eye across the room, and his pheromone signals carried determination and concern. He knew what she was thinking. Many of the Ninth Talon would not survive this mission. After the briefing, they walked together to the observation deck. They did not speak, both lost in thought. Finally, Vektar broke the silence. I cannot order my soldiers into a mission with such low survival odds without being willing to lead from the front. I will be in the initial breach team. I know. Elena had expected nothing else. And I will be right behind you with the medical team. Vektar turned to face her. Elena, as your bondmate, I want you safe. But as battle commander, I know we will need every skilled medic we can get. I am caught between conflicting desires. Elena reached up to touch his face. Then let me make it easy for you. I am going. Not because you order it, but because those soldiers will need me. She smiled. Besides, someone needs to keep you from being too rigidly adherent to protocol if things go wrong. Vektar's mandibles clicked in affectionate exasperation. You are incorrigible. You knew that when you bonded with me. They spent the night together, neither sleeping much, simply holding each other. In the morning, they would prepare for the mission. Tomorrow, they would face the possibility of death. But tonight, they had the warmth of connection, the comfort of being understood. The assault force departed forward operating base nightfall 3 days later. Elena watched Arcturus Prime recede through the viewport, wondering if she would see its purple landscape again. Beside her, Vektar was reviewing tactical data with his usual meticulous attention, but she could sense the tension in his pheromone signals. The journey took 18 hours. Elena spent the time checking her medical supplies, running through every possible scenario. She had requisitioned additional human medical equipment, knowing that Kaeldar protocols would not be sufficient for the mass casualty situation they were likely to face. As they approached the target system, Colonel Martinez called all unit commanders to a final briefing. The holographic display showed the Dominion facility in stark detail, a massive complex built into an asteroid. Final intelligence updates show increased enemy presence. Martinez's expression was grim. They know we are coming. This will not be a surprise attack. Casualty projections have increased. We may lose half our force. But if we succeed, we change the course of this war. She looked around the room. Are your units ready? The responses came without hesitation. Every commander affirmed their readiness. The assault began as their transport accelerated toward the asteroid, dodging defensive fire. They hit the surface hard, and the 9th Talon poured out into a storm of weapons fire. Elena followed with the medical team, taking cover while the assault team advanced. The Dominion defenses were formidable. Automated turrets tracked targets with inhuman precision, while enemy soldiers fired from fortified positions. The first casualties came within minutes. A Kaeldar soldier named Treshik took a direct hit to his thorax. Elena was moving before he hit the ground, sprinting across open terrain with complete disregard for her own safety. She reached him and began working immediately, stabilizing him enough to be moved to cover. Then she was on to the next casualty and the next. The 9th Talon fought their way forward meter by meter, breaching the outer defenses through determination and tactical brilliance. Vektar led from the front, his weapons blazing as he coordinated the assault. Elena watched him with a mixture of pride and terror. They reached the primary breach point, a reinforced door that had to be destroyed. The demolition team moved forward with their charges, working frantically while the 9th Talon provided covering fire. Elena was treating a human soldier with severe burns when she heard Vektar's voice over the comm system. Elena, fall back. Enemy reinforcements are converging on our position. Medical team needs to evacuate now. She looked up and saw Dominion soldiers pouring in from multiple directions. The demolition team was still working, needing just another minute. Medical team, fall back to the rally point. Elena gave the order even as she continued working on her patient. That includes you, Elena. Vektar's voice carried both command and desperation. Get out of there. Not without you. Elena finished stabilizing the soldier and helped him move toward the rally point. Around her, the 9th Talon fought desperately, holding back the enemy while the demolition team finished. The charges finally detonated. The explosion tore through the door, creating the breach. But the cost was severe. 8 members of the 9th Talon were down, more wounded. They had completed their objective, but barely. The main assault force poured through the breach. The 9th Talon fell back to defensive positions while Elena worked frantically on the wounded. She lost track of time, moving from patient to patient in a blur of blood and desperate improvisation. Then she heard the sound she had been dreading. Vektar's comm signal went dead. She looked up to see him fall, his armor shattered by an explosion. Without thinking, she was running toward him, medical kit in hand. Reksha tried to stop her. Medic, it is too dangerous. She shoved past him. Vektar was her bondmate. Nothing else mattered. She reached him and dropped to her knees. The damage was catastrophic. His exoskeleton was fractured in multiple places, hemolymph pooling beneath him. By any medical standard, he should already be dead. But Elena did not accept that. She worked with savage intensity, using every trick she knew, human and Kaeldar techniques blended together. She stopped the bleeding, stabilized the fractures, supported his failing cardiac clusters with a combination of medications that should not have worked together but somehow did. Stay with me. Her voice was fierce. You do not have permission to die. That is an order. His compound eyes focused weakly on her face. His pheromone signals were barely detectable, but the translator caught them. Love, gratitude, fear. The evacuation call came. The facility was rigged to explode in 10 minutes. Reksha and 2 other soldiers lifted Vektar carefully, carrying him toward the extraction point. Elena ran alongside them, monitoring his vitals, adjusting treatments on the move. They made it to the transport with seconds to spare. The facility exploded behind them as they lifted off, a ball of fire that consumed the Dominion Command Center. The mission was a success. The casualty rate had been 42%, even worse than projected. But they had won. Elena spent the next 30 hours in surgery, working on Vektar with a team of specialists. The procedures were delicate, experimental in some cases, combining human and Kaeldar medical techniques in ways that had never been attempted. But slowly, incrementally, his condition stabilized. When he finally regained consciousness, Elena was sitting beside his bed, exhausted beyond measure. His compound eyes opened slowly. You saved me again. Of course I did. Elena managed a tired smile. You are my bondmate, my responsibility, my heart. His mandibles clicked weakly. I thought I understood what it meant to be Reshtar to you, connected. But I understand now that it goes deeper than tradition or obligation. What do you mean? I mean that I love you, not because Kaeldar customs demand it, not because you saved my life, but because you challenged everything I believed, showed me a better way to exist, and made me want to be worthy of you. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. You already are worthy. You taught me that precision has value, that planning matters, that discipline and structure can coexist with flexibility and adaptation. We made each other better. Vektar reached up with one of his hands, touching her face gently. Then let us continue doing so. For as long as we both live. The war ended 6 months later. The destruction of the Dominion Command facility had broken their strategic coordination across the sector. Without centralized command, their forces collapsed into disorganized resistance that was systematically eliminated. Peace came gradually, settlement by settlement, system by system. Elena and Vector were offered positions training the new integrated coalition forces. They accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to spread the lessons they had learned. That strength came from diversity, that different approaches complemented rather than contradicted each other. That understanding between species was not just possible but essential. They built a home together on Arcturus Prime, in a small settlement near what had once been Forward Operating Base Nightfall. The base had been converted into a cultural center, a place where humans and Kaeldar could learn about each other. Their woven pattern hung in the center of their home, a daily reminder of what they had created together. Vector's parents visited eventually, curious about the human who had captured their son's heart. Elena's nervousness proved unnecessary. They were fascinated by her, asking endless questions about human culture and medicine. They spent 3 weeks together, and by the end, Vector's mother was teaching Elena advanced pattern weaving techniques while his father discussed military history with both of them. One evening, as they sat together watching Arcturus Prime's sun set over the purple landscape, Vector turned to Elena with a question. "Do you ever regret it, coming here, being assigned to a unit that did not want you?" Elena thought about it carefully. "No, because it led to this, to us, to understanding that our differences are not weaknesses but strengths when we learn to work together. The Kaeldar and humans are still so different. We will always see the world through different eyes." "Good." Elena leaned against him. "The universe needs both precision and chaos, order and flexibility. Your people and mine, we balance each other. We make each other whole. You make me whole." Vector's pheromone signals washed over her, pure and undiluted love. His mandibles clicked softly. "When I first met you, I saw only chaos. Now I see possibility. And I saw only rigid doctrine.
Elena smiled.
Now I see the value of structure. We taught each other. We did. And we will continue to do so." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different philosophies, united by shared experience, mutual respect, and a love that transcended the boundaries they had been taught to accept as absolute. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the settlement. Human voices mixed with Kaeldar clicking. Children of both species playing together, learning each other's languages, growing up in a world where interspecies friendship was normal rather than exceptional. This was the future they had fought for, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. Not the elimination of differences, but the celebration of them. Elena reached for Vector's hand with her own, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that belonged to neither culture but to both. In that moment, under the alien stars of Arcturus Prime, they were neither human nor Kaeldar but something new, something better, something that proved the universe was vast enough to hold infinite possibility, if only people were brave enough to reach across the darkness and find each other. And they had found each other, against all odds, despite all obstacles, through war and chaos and rigid protocol. They had found each other and built something beautiful from the ruins of their preconceptions. It was enough. It was everything. The universe kept turning, stars burning in the endless night. But here, in this small corner of space, two hearts beat in harmony. Different rhythms, different patterns, but creating together a melody that neither could have sung alone. And that was the greatest improvisation of all.